Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to do a little bit of rant. And I'm going to talk a little bit about personal trainers and squatting, but I may also mention some other lists. We're just going to see where this goes. I really appreciate the fact, and I want to state this up front, that I appreciate the fact that the personal training industry is shifting more in the direction of what they're at least terming functional fitness. Now, that doesn't always include things that are actually always helpful. But at the very least, you're seeing a lot less machine stuff, fluff and everything else. Again, I understand some of those things have their place for rehabilitation. They have their place for bodybuilders trying to finish the fine detail of one little head of a muscle or whatever. And I get that. I get that. That has its place. But the vast overwhelming majority of people who are going to a gym, that stuff probably isn't the best use of their time, and it certainly isn't the best use of their time when they're hiring a professional to teach them and help them. And I know I have a lot of followers on here who are trainers, and you guys will have your opinions on this. But the thing is, we're seeing a lot more barbell work being done. But what frustrates me is that when you have trainers who are teaching people these basic exercises like this barbell squat or the deadlift, and they can't teach them to perform it even remotely correctly. And one of the most egregious things I see on the squat is the inability of these coaches to get their clients to depth. And you'll see it being done where they have access to boxes, they have access to stools, they have tools available to teach them to safely sit back and down so that they can get their hips back enough that they can sit down. And I'm not talking about that handful of people who don't have the mobility, because there are a handful of people who don't have the mobility, and many when they first start. Like Brittany couldn't squat to depth when we first started with her because of actual hip issues. But we were able to sort that out very, very quickly. It's not something that should drag on for months and months and months, getting someone's hips mobile enough to sit down and actually break parallel. I don't even mean them having to do a full squat and ass to grass, just get them to parallel. But you see this, and you'll see personal trainers teaching people to squat, and they won't have them going to depth. They'll be high squatting, and I mean they'll be 6 or 8 inches above parallel, and then they'll start loading them. They'll start loading the bar. And I've seen this done even with men, and they'll have men squatting, relatively healthy middle-aged men, and they'll have them start adding weight and build up to 135. Now, they're already squatting 8 inches high with the empty bar, and their knees are tracking way over the toes, and they're putting the brakes on, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. They're trying to stay upright and have been trying to put their butt back a little, but not really. They just kind of slouch down and then let their knees come forward, way forward, and then they stop halfway, almost sometimes barely below a half squat. Then they start loading them. Well, they didn't teach them how to squat correctly to begin with. So what happens when we see this? Every time they add another 20 pounds or 30 pounds to the bar, they get 2 inches higher. And by the time they get them to 135, they're above a half squat, right? Their knee legs are 45 degrees from the floor. Their thighs at a 45 degree angle. They're not even coming beyond the halfway mark, and the knees tracking way past the toes. Now, as we've talked about in the past, this is the fastest way to hurt your knees. I've talked about that a lot in detail in the past, that half squats are actually the easiest way to damage your knees. Almost everyone who talked about how they hurt their knees squatting years ago is from doing heavy half squats, if they didn't use knee wraps. Knee wraps are your other big one. So you see that all the time, and it just begs the question. If a person is a personal trainer, this is not a recreational gym goer. I don't expect all of you out there who've been lifting weights 2 or 3 years and learned on your own, read a couple books, you shouldn't be required to teach someone else. It's not your job. Most of you have other jobs, other things you do for a living. You're not a fitness professional. In other words, this isn't your 40-hour-a-week, 5-day-a-week job, day in, day out, to get people in shape. You've got an excuse. When you have personal trainers who have been training people for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and they can't take the time to go read a basic book on coaching people, in other words, what in the hell are they doing with their time? If it's your job, and people who go into personal training, I'm going to assume it's something they're passionate about. Why would you take a job like that that's really competitive? It's very difficult to make a good living doing. Unless you're really good at it, it's something people usually have a passion towards. Why in the world wouldn't you go take the time to at least read some books on how to teach people how to squat? Why wouldn't you go read Starting Strength? Why wouldn't you find some YouTube videos on coaching the squat so that you could teach other people how to squat? The material is so easily available that a layman could actually go spend a few days in between doing the other stuff in the evening. When they get home from work, they could go learn enough material that they could grab the average person off the street and teach them to squat to depth and have them squatting to depth fairly quickly if they just dedicated a few hours of their life of reading how to do this. So why in the world are these people charging people money to get them in shape and having them do a barbell squat who don't even take the time to learn it? And I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this is probably about 2/3 of trainers I see out there. I only see about 1/3 of trainers, the different gyms I've gone to over the years, only about 1/3 of trainers who are teaching people the barbell squat who actually teach it even remotely correctly. The other 2/3, and it'll be in the same gym sometimes. You know, you'll see 3 different trainers in a gym who coach a squat. One of them will teach a squat pretty good, and the other 2 are letting people half squat with their knees tracking way past their toes, no idea what they're doing. They don't even teach them the basic biomechanics of the movement, and they have them actually load the exercise. You know, I can understand if you're training someone's mobility, but if someone isn't mobile enough to do an exercise, why would you start loading it? You need to get them to getting to depth, and particularly, why would you be putting 135 on the bar, you know, putting the bigger plates on? Again, I can understand some people having mobility issues that need enough weight to push them down to help build their mobility, but they're not doing it to build their mobility. They're just loading them up in a partial. And this is just completely unprofessional. And it just blows the mind that these people do this for a living and they can't bother to take the time to learn how to teach their clients. And I understand that we know barbell lifts are the best thing most people could be doing. I agree with that, but teach them correctly. And I mean, we see it with other exercises too. How about the deadlift? How many times do you see a coach teaching someone the deadlift? Again, a trainer, not a coach. How many times do we see a personal trainer who's trying to teach the deadlift? They don't have them pull the slack out of the bar. Yeah, they just let them jerk the weight off the floor. They don't teach them how to get tight. Usually they have their hips way too high. And I don't mean like when people say, oh, you deadlift with kind of high. I do deadlift with kind of high hips because I'm built to get away with it. It works very well for my leverages. I pulled well over 600 pounds that way in the past. And so the thing is, I'm not talking about my high hips. I'm talking about people with really high hips who are starting with a back that's sometimes, you know, at a 30-degree or less angle, who are jerking the weight off the floor without pulling the slack out. And you'll see them actually teaching that. You know, you have to wonder, how are you doing this for a living? How do you work with clients every day and you teach these exercises to your clients as a profession for a living, and you'd never bothered to learn how to teach the exercises? You don't know the proper biomechanics on how to safely and correctly do and load these basic exercises. I mean, it's hard to mess up a deadlift. Like, you could literally fix anyone who knows how to deadlift could take any of these clients who you see doing this stuff and fix this inside of 5 minutes. You could take that client away from that trainer in 5 minutes. You could fix their deadlift. The deadlift is really, really easy to fix problems with. It's the easiest exercise in the world to coach. And yet, you know, we see this. And same thing with bench press. How often do we see someone training, even a guy, I've seen them training guys who do bench press, have them stop short of the chest and actually be loading it up. I'm talking 200 plus pounds on the bar, doing these partial reps. No elbow tuck. Again, basic stuff. And you've got to wonder, if you're going to make your living doing this, why wouldn't you take the time to learn how to do these things correctly? Why wouldn't you spend some time researching and learning how to not hurt your clients and to give them the best results so they get the most strength, the most mobility, the lowest injury rates for when they do get strong on these exercises? I just don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's just a complete lack of professionalism. And I think sometimes the only reason these trainers are teaching these big barbell lifts is because the industry has trended that way, because everyone realizes at this point that you get the most bang for your buck out of these exercises. They realize that, so they try to teach them, and they have their clients do it, but they don't bother to learn correctly. And they're not giving their clients their money's worth, because in all honesty, the amount of time these clients are spending with these trainers, they can go do their own research and learn how to perform these lifts better than these guys are teaching it sometimes. All right, guys, rant over.